The Yule Ball had been a strange night for Harry. Seeing Hermione descend the stairs in her periwinkle dress, glowing with confidence, had been surprising, to say the least. He had always known she was pretty in a casual way, but tonight she had been stunning. But what had truly unsettled him was the pang of something deep in his chest when she had smiled at Victor Crumb. He hadn't thought much of it at first. After all, he had been too distracted by his disastrous evening with Parvati. But as the weeks passed, that strange feeling lingered. Hermione had been spending a lot of time with Crumb, and Harry had told himself it didn't bother him. But he caught himself watching them from across the common room, his mood souring whenever she laughed at something Crumb said. He hated that feeling, but he couldn't deny it anymore. He cared about Hermione, more than he should. The realization was overwhelming, and Harry didn't know what to do with it. He couldn't just tell her. What if she didn't feel the same way? What if it ruined their friendship? Worse, what if she was truly happy with Crumb? Still, he couldn't ignore the way his heart clenched when she hugged him, the way he lingered on the scent of her hair whenever she leaned close to read over his shoulder. These weren't normal thoughts about a best friend. One evening, as they sat in the library, Hermione was flipping through a thick Transfiguration book while Harry pretended to study. But his mind was miles away, completely tangled in the thoughts he wished he could suppress. "You're staring," Hermione said without looking up. Harry flushed. "What?" She turned a page and smirked. "You've been staring at me for the last 10 minutes. He scrambled for an excuse. "I was just thinking about the first task. You know, dragons and all." She gave him a look, clearly unimpressed. "The first task was months ago, Harry." "Right." He grabbed the nearest book and opened it at random. "An EWT-level potions. Sounds fun, doesn't it?" She giggled, but her smile faltered when she glanced toward the entrance of the library. Crumb had just walked in, scanning the room until his eyes landed on her. Harry felt his stomach drop. "I should go," she said, sounding hesitant. He nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, of course." As she gathered her things, she paused. "You've been acting weird lately. Are you okay?" He hesitated for a second too long. "I'm fine," he lied. She frowned, as if she didn't believe him, but she didn't push. "All right, but if you ever want to talk." Harry nodded again, but as she walked away, his chest ached in a way he didn't quite understand. For the first time, he wished he had said something. Harry tried to ignore the feelings growing inside him, but the more he tried, the worse it got. Every time Hermione smiled at him, every time she defended him against Snape or scolded him for not doing his homework, he felt it, a warmth spreading through him, something more than friendship. But what was he supposed to do? Just tell her? Risk everything? No, that wasn't an option. Ron made things even more complicated. "You know, I think Crumb's all right," Ron admitted one evening in the common room, though his voice was begrudging. "He's not as much of a git as I thought." Harry stiffened. He hadn't expected that. "You spent half the year calling him a bulging-faced show-off," Harry reminded him. Ron shrugged. "Yeah, well, Hermione seems to like him, and he's been decent to her. If she's happy, then whatever." That made Harry feel even worse. Ron had gotten over his jealousy, and yet here Harry was, struggling with feelings he wasn't supposed to have. As the days passed, he found himself pulling away from Hermione just a little. It wasn't intentional, but every time she laughed with Crumb or mentioned writing letters to him, Harry's heart twisted. He didn't want to be that friend who stood in the background, pretending to be fine while he was anything but. But Hermione noticed. "Harry," she said one evening in the common room, setting her book aside. "You've been distant lately." "What?" "No, I haven't." She gave him a pointed look. "You have. You barely talk to me anymore. You disappear whenever I try to study with you." He couldn't meet her eyes. "I'm just busy," he muttered. "Busy avoiding me?" His silence was enough of an answer. "Harry," she said more softly, leaning closer. "Did I do something?" "No." He shook his head quickly. "No, it's not you. It's just," he exhaled, gripping the edge of the couch. "There's a lot on my mind." "Then tell me," she urged. "You always talk to me about things. Not this." "I can't," he said before he could stop himself. Her brows furrowed, concern filling her eyes. "Why not?" He opened his mouth, but the words wouldn't come. "Because I'm in love with you. Because I can't stop thinking about you. Because every time I see you with him, I feel like I'm losing something I never even had." But instead, he just shook his head. It's nothing. Hermione didn't look convinced. You know you can tell me anything, right? She said gently. And that was the problem. He couldn't. Not this time. I know, he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. But as she watched him, her expression unreadable, Harry had the sinking feeling that she wasn't going to let this go. Hermione wasn't the type to ignore things, especially when it came to Harry. She had spent years noticing every little detail about him. When he was stressed, when he was hiding something, when he was pretending to be fine but wasn't. And now she knew something was wrong. Harry was avoiding her, pulling away when she got too close, shutting down conversations that used to flow so easily between them. It wasn't like him, and it made her stomach twist with unease. So that night, she decided she wasn't going to let it slide. She found him outside near the Black Lake, sitting on a large rock, staring at the water. It was late, the castle quiet behind them, and she wrapped her robes tighter around herself as she approached. You know, she said, breaking the silence, if you wanted to be alone, you should have picked a better spot. I always find you here. Harry didn't turn, but his shoulders tensed slightly. Didn't think anyone would be looking. Hermione stepped closer, sitting beside him. I was. They sat in silence for a moment, the water rippling under the moonlight. I'm worried about you, she finally admitted. You've been acting different. Ever since the old ball. Harry stiffened. That's not true. It is, she countered. And you won't talk to me about it. You always talk to me, Harry. He swallowed hard, keeping his gaze on the lake. Maybe some things are better left unsaid. That hurt. Hermione didn't know why, but it did. Not between us, she said, her voice softer now. We don't keep secrets, remember? Harry let out a humorless chuckle. You think I don't want to tell you? He finally turned to face her, and Hermione was taken aback by the look in his eyes. Frustration, hesitation, something else she couldn't quite name. I do, but I can't. She searched his face. Why? Because it'll change everything. The way he said it, so certain, so full of something unspoken, made her heart race. A strange feeling settled in her chest, something unfamiliar. Slowly, she reached for his hand, her fingers barely brushing against his. Harry, whatever it is, I promise, it won't change anything. He exhaled sharply, looking down at their almost touching hands. You don't know that. A quiet moment passed between them, thick with something neither of them could name. And then, I should go, Harry muttered, standing abruptly and pulling away. Hermione blinked, her hands suddenly cold where his warmth had been. Harry, I'll see you tomorrow, he said quickly, before turning and walking back toward the castle. Hermione sat there, staring after him, heart pounding in a way she didn't quite understand. But one thing was clear, whatever Harry was hiding, it wasn't just some passing thought. And for the first time, Hermione wondered if she had been missing something right in front of her all along. The following days were strange. Hermione found herself thinking about Harry more than usual, analyzing their conversation by the Black Lake, replaying his words in her mind. It wasn't like Harry to be this guarded with her. He had always trusted her with everything. Why was this different? More than that, she couldn't shake the way he had looked at her that night. She had always known Harry cared about her, but there had been something else in his eyes, something deeper. And it terrified her that she hadn't noticed it before. By the time the weekend arrived, she had decided she couldn't ignore it anymore. She found Harry in the common room, sitting by the fire, pretending to read a book. But Hermione knew he wasn't reading. His eyes weren't moving, and his fingers were gripping the pages too tightly. She sat down beside him, crossing her arms. We need to talk. Harry sighed, closing the book. Hermione. No, she shook her head. No more avoiding. No more excuses. Something is wrong, and I know it's about me. His jaw tightened. It's not. Don't lie to me, Harry. That made him pause. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Hermione's breath hitched. Because for the first time, she saw it. It was in his eyes, the way they softened when he looked at her, the hesitation, the fear. And suddenly it all made sense. The distance, the avoidance, the way he had been acting ever since the old ball. She felt her stomach twist. Oh, she whispered. Harry immediately turned away. Forget it. But Hermione wasn't going to let him run this time. She reached for his hand, stopping him. Harry. He exhaled, rubbing his face with his free hand. "This is exactly why I didn't want to tell you." "You didn't tell me," she pointed out. "I figured it out." His lips twitched, but the smile didn't last. "It doesn't change anything, Hermione." Her heart pounded. "How long?" Harry hesitated, then muttered, "I don't know." "A while." Hermione swallowed. "Since the old ball?" He nodded, still not looking at her. She let out a shaky breath, her mind racing. This was Harry, her best friend, the person she trusted most. How had she not seen this before? "I." She started to say something, but she didn't know what. Harry let out a bitter laugh. "It's fine, Hermione. Really. You don't have to say anything. I know you don't feel the same way." That made her freeze. Did she? For the first time, she actually considered it. Harry had always been a constant in her life, always there, always hers in a way she had never questioned. She had never thought about it, never let herself. But now, sitting here with him, the weight of his confession between them, she realized something. The idea of losing Harry, of things never being the same, terrified her. And maybe, just maybe, this wasn't as one-sided as he thought. Hermione lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts tangled in a way they had never been before. Harry had feelings for her. She wasn't sure why it felt so shocking, but it did. Maybe because she had always assumed their bond was unshakable, something that would never change. But now she wasn't so sure. The way Harry had looked at her, the raw emotion in his voice, it wasn't something fleeting. It had been there for a while, buried beneath the surface. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized that it wasn't just Harry who had changed. She had too. Every conversation, every shared glance, every moment of silence between them, it all felt different now. And it wasn't just because she knew how Harry felt. It was because something inside her was shifting too. The next morning, she found herself unusually distracted. She barely heard anything in class, didn't take proper notes, and even ignored Ron when he asked if she was all right. She was too busy replaying every interaction with Harry, looking at them with fresh eyes. When lunchtime came, she found him sitting alone at the far end of the Gryffindor table, poking at his food. Hermione took a deep breath and sat down across from him. "Harry." He looked up, clearly surprised she had sought him out so quickly. "Hey." There was hesitation in his voice, a careful distance that hadn't been there before. And Hermione hated it. She didn't want things to be weird between them. She didn't want him to think she was going to pretend nothing had happened. So she did the only thing she could think of. She reached across the table and took his hand. Harry froze, eyes darting to their joined hands before flickering back to her. "What are you?" "I don't know what to say yet," Hermione admitted, her voice soft. "But I don't want you to pull away from me." Harry swallowed hard. "I don't want to either." "Then don't." They stayed like that for a moment, hands clasped between them, a silent understanding passing between them. It wasn't an answer, not yet, but it was something. And for now, that was enough. The days that followed were different. Not in an obvious way, at least not to anyone else, but for Harry and Hermione, everything had shifted. Hermione wasn't sure how to define it. She and Harry still spent time together, still studied in the library, still sat by the fire in the common room late at night. But there was an unspoken awareness between them now, something lingering beneath the surface. She caught herself noticing things about Harry that she hadn't before. The way he ran a hand through his hair when he was frustrated. The way his green eyes softened when he looked at her. The way his presence made her feel safe, grounded, and if she was honest, something more. And Harry, he was trying to act normal, but Hermione could tell he was holding back. It wasn't until one evening, when they were alone in the library, that the tension finally broke. Hermione had been trying to focus on her transfiguration essay, but her mind kept wandering. She glanced up from her parchment and found Harry watching her, his quill resting idly between his fingers. Her breath caught. "Harry?" He hesitated before speaking. "Do you regret it?" She frowned. "Regret what?" "Telling me not to pull away." The question hit her harder than she expected. She set her quill down and met his gaze. "No," she said firmly. "I don't." Harry let out a breath, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "Good." Silence stretched between them, thick with unsaid words. Hermione took a steadying breath, her heart pounding. "Harry, I've been thinking." He waited, eyes locked on hers. When you told me how you felt, she said carefully, I didn't know how to respond. Not because I didn't care, but because I never let myself think about it before. Harry's fingers tightened around his quill, but he didn't say anything. Hermione swallowed, choosing her words carefully. But now, I think about it all the time. His eyes widened slightly. You do. She nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. And I don't know what it means yet, but I do know that you matter to me, Harry. More than anyone. Harry exhaled slowly, as if he had been holding his breath. For the first time in days, he smiled, not a forced or hesitant one, but a real, genuine smile. That's enough for me, he said softly. Hermione felt something shift between them, something fragile yet real. It wasn't a grand confession or a dramatic realization. It was something simpler, something honest. And as she met Harry's gaze, she realized, maybe that was how all great things began. The next few days felt like walking a tightrope. Everything between Harry and Hermione was balanced on a delicate thread, one that neither of them wanted to break. They still spent time together, still studied, still laughed at Ron's ridiculous theories about Quidditch tactics. But underneath it all, there was something new. A quiet understanding, a connection that hadn't been there before. Hermione wasn't sure how to define it. They weren't exactly together, but they weren't just friends anymore either. And the more time she spent with Harry, the more she realized how much she enjoyed this feeling. The quiet moments, the subtle glances, the way her heart quickened when his hand brushed against hers. But as much as she wanted to figure things out, Hogwarts was never one to let life be simple. It started with whispers. At first, she thought she was imagining it. The way people looked at them, the way conversations hushed when they entered a room. But as the days passed, the whispers grew louder. By the end of the week, it was impossible to ignore. Hermione, have you heard? Ginny asked, dropping into the seat beside her at breakfast. Hermione barely looked up from her book. Heard what? Ginny sighed dramatically. Honestly, you need to pay more attention. The whole school is talking about you and Harry. That got her attention. She stiffened. What do you mean? Ginny smirked. People think you two are dating. Hermione felt her stomach drop. That's ridiculous. Is it? Ginny raised an eyebrow. You two have been acting different lately. Before Hermione could argue, a loud voice interrupted them. So it's true then? Ron plopped down across from them, frowning. You and Harry? Hermione's heart pounded. Ron. He held up a hand. Look, I'm not mad or anything. I don't know, I didn't think you two would ever actually. He trailed off, scratching his head awkwardly. Hermione opened her mouth, but before she could say anything, Harry slid into the seat next to her. What's going on? He asked, glancing between them. Ron shrugged. Just the fact that the entire school thinks you and Hermione are a couple. Harry blinked. What? Ginny grinned. You didn't notice? It's all anyone's talking about. Harry looked at Hermione, a question in his eyes. Hermione sighed, running a hand through her hair. I suppose it was bound to happen. Do we say something? Harry asked hesitantly. Ginny waved a hand. If you deny it, people will just think you're hiding it. If you confirm it, they'll never leave you alone. Ron huffed. Yeah, welcome to the wonderful world of Hogwarts gossip. Hermione chewed her lip, her mind racing. She hadn't expected this, hadn't been ready for it. Whatever was happening between her and Harry, it was still new, still something they were figuring out. And now, the whole school had turned it into a spectacle. Harry must have sensed her unease because he leaned in slightly, his voice quiet. Hey, are you okay? She met his gaze, seeing nothing but concern. And suddenly, the rest of the world didn't seem to matter as much. Hermione took a deep breath and nodded. Yeah, I'm okay. Because no matter what the school thought, no matter what rumors spread, whatever this was between them. And that was all that mattered. The Hogwarts rumor mill was relentless. By the next morning, Hermione could barely step into the common room without hearing whispers behind her back. Some students speculated that she and Harry had been secretly dating for months. Others insisted they were just moments away from a dramatic public confession. Hermione did her best to ignore it. She told herself that gossip always faded over time, that people would move on to something else soon enough. But when she stepped into the Great Hall for breakfast, she realized just how wrong she was. A group of Hufflepuff girls were giggling and sneaking glances at Harry, whispering behind their hands. A pair of Ravenclaws looked deep in conversation, one of them glancing toward Hermione before shaking his head. Even at the Gryffindor table, Seamus grinned as he leaned toward Ron. "So, mate, you reckon they're snogging in secret or what?" Ron groaned. "For Merlin's sake, Seamus." Harry dropped his toast onto his plate with a sigh. "Brilliant." Hermione clenched her jaw. "This is ridiculous." Ron at least looked mildly sympathetic. "It'll die down eventually." Harry shook his head. "We can't just sit here and let this get worse." He turned to Hermione. "Maybe we should just tell people the truth. The truth. That they weren't officially together. That they were figuring things out." But for some reason, Hermione hesitated. Would people believe them? Or would it only add fuel to the fire? Before she could answer, Draco Malfoy sauntered past their table, smirking. "Potter and Granger, huh? Well, I suppose it makes sense. The chosen one and his know-it-all sidekick." Hermione gritted her teeth, but before she could retort, Harry beat her to it. "At least I don't have to buy my relationships, Malfoy." Draco's smirk faltered. "Watch it, Potter." Harry just turned back to his breakfast, unfazed. Hermione stared at him, a strange warmth blooming in her chest. He had always defended her, always stood up for her. But now it felt different, more personal. Later that day, Hermione pulled Harry aside in the quiet corner of the library. "Harry," she said carefully, "are you sure you want to deal with all this?" Harry frowned. "What do you mean?" "This," she gestured vaguely. "The rumors, the attention. It's only going to get worse." Harry tilted his head, studying her. "Are you asking if I regret having feelings for you?" Hermione swallowed. I don't want you to feel pressured by all of this." For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he took a step closer. "Hermione," he said softly, "the only thing I regret is not realizing how I felt about you sooner." Her breath caught. She had spent so much time analyzing the situation, trying to make sense of her own feelings. But hearing Harry say it so plainly, so sincerely, something clicked. This wasn't just about rumors. This was about them. And for the first time, Hermione let herself wonder. What if she had been ignoring something that had been there all along? The weight of Harry's words settled over Hermione, lingering in her mind long after they left the library. He didn't regret this. He wasn't afraid of what people thought. So why was she? That night, Hermione sat by the fire in the Gryffindor common room, her Transfiguration textbook open in her lap but unread. The words blurred together as her mind replayed the past few weeks. The stolen glances, the quiet moments, the way Harry looked at her like she was the only person in the room. Was this something she had been too blind to see all along? She jumped when someone sat beside her. "You're thinking too hard again," Harry said with a small smile. Hermione huffed. "I do that a lot." Harry chuckled, then grew quiet. "What are you thinking about?" Hermione hesitated. She could lie, pretend she was worrying about an upcoming exam, but she was tired of running from this. "You," she admitted softly. Harry blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Oh!" Hermione turned toward him. "Harry, when you told me how you felt, I didn't know what to say because I never thought about it before. But now I can't stop thinking about it." His green eyes searched hers. And a million thoughts raced through her mind, but in the end, only one mattered. "I think I feel the same way," she whispered. The fire crackled beside them, filling the silence. Harry's lips parted slightly, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You do?" Hermione let out a soft, nervous laugh. "Yes. And I think maybe I've felt this way for a long time. I just never realized it." Harry exhaled a slow, relieved breath. "Hermione." She didn't know who moved first, but suddenly they were closer, his hand brushing against hers, fingers intertwining. Everything else, the rumors, the whispers, the unwanted attention, faded into the background. For the first time in weeks, Hermione felt at peace. Because this wasn't about Hogwarts gossip. This was real, and she was finally ready to embrace it. The common room was nearly empty now, the fire burning low, casting flickering shadows across the stone walls. But Hermione and Harry remained where they were, hands intertwined, neither willing to break the fragile moment between them. Hermione had spent so long trying to make sense of her feelings, to rationalize them like an arithmancy equation, but now she understood something important. Love wasn't meant to be analyzed. It was meant to be felt. And right now, she felt everything. Harry squeezed her hand gently. So what now? Hermione smiled, tilting her head slightly. I suppose we just take things one step at a time. Harry grinned. That sounds like a very Hermione answer. She rolled her eyes, but there was no real annoyance behind it. Would you rather I say we should rush into things without thinking? Harry chuckled. No, I like your way better. His smile softened. I just want to do this right. With you. Something about those words made her heart tighten. There was no hesitation in his voice, no uncertainty. He meant it. And for once, Hermione didn't feel the need to overthink. I'd like that too, she admitted. The quiet stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was warm, comforting. But just as Hermione was beginning to lose herself in the peacefulness of it, the portrait hole swung open, and a familiar voice shattered the moment. There you two are. Ron stood in the entrance, arms crossed, looking between them. His brows furrowed slightly. What's going on? Hermione and Harry instinctively pulled their hands apart, but Ron's eyes flickered between them, and a knowing look crossed his face. Oh, he said slowly. Hermione braced herself, expecting some kind of outburst, but to her surprise, Ron just let out a sigh and plopped down in the chair across from them. Well, I guess that explains all the whispering lately. Harry hesitated. Ron. Ron held up a hand. Look, I'll be honest, it's weird. You two have always been my best friends, and I never really thought about you like that. He made a vague gesture between them. But I also know you're both ridiculously stubborn and probably perfect for each other. Hermione blinked, taken aback. That was surprisingly mature of you. Ron scoffed. Don't sound so shocked. Then he shrugged. As long as things don't get awkward and you don't start snogging in front of me, I don't care. Harry grinned. Noted. Ron leaned back in his chair, looking at the two of them again, and then a smirk tugged at his lips. Though I do expect to be consulted on any future relationship matters. As your best mate, it's my duty. Hermione groaned, but Harry just laughed. And just like that, things felt normal again. Maybe the rumors would keep swirling. Maybe people would talk. But none of that mattered, because for the first time, Hermione wasn't worried about the future. She had Harry, and that was enough. Over the next few days, Hermione felt the shift in her world more acutely than she had expected. It wasn't just about the rumors, though they certainly hadn't stopped, but about the quiet, undeniable change between her and Harry. They didn't have to say it out loud, but the way he lingered beside her in the common room, the way his hand brushed against hers in the hallways, the way their eyes met across the library, it was real. It was happening, and Hermione wasn't sure why, but that realization sent an odd mixture of warmth and nervous energy coursing through her. They weren't just best friends anymore. They were something more. One evening, as they sat in their usual spot near the fireplace, Harry nudged her gently with his elbow. You're thinking too hard again. Hermione glanced at him, lips twitching. You keep saying that. That's because it's true. She sighed, shutting her book. It's just different now. Us. Harry nodded. Yeah, but I don't think that's a bad thing. She studied him for a moment, searching for any sign of doubt, but all she found was quiet certainty in his green eyes. A slow smile spread across her face. No, I don't think it is either. Before she could say anything else, a sudden loud voice interrupted them. Oi, there you are. Ron plopped down onto the couch across from them, his expression one of pure exasperation. Hermione raised an eyebrow. Something wrong, Ron? Ron groaned, throwing his head back. Malfoy's being a prat again. Kept going on about how he wasn't surprised that you two finally admitted it. Harry frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Ron snorted. Apparently, he's been convinced for years that you two had unresolved tension. He made air quotes with his fingers. Told me he called it ages ago. Hermione rolled her eyes. Honestly, Malfoy has nothing better to do with his time. Harry smirked. Should we congratulate him on his remarkable observational skills? Ron shook his head. Nah, let's just keep annoying him by existing. Seems to do the trick. Hermione chuckled, but inside, a strange sense of realization settled over her. If Malfoy, of all people, had seen it coming, then maybe she had been blind to something that had always been there. She glanced at Harry, who was still grinning at Ron's complaints, completely at ease. This felt right. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't forced. It just was. And for the first time, Hermione let herself stop overthinking and just be. Days passed, and Hermione found herself growing more comfortable with the idea of being with Harry. It was strange at first, navigating this new dynamic between them, but it also felt natural, as if something had finally clicked into place. They didn't make a grand announcement, nor did they try to hide it. It was simply them, as it had always been, except now, there was an unspoken understanding in the way Harry reached for her hand under the table, or the way Hermione leaned just a little closer when they studied together. The rest of Hogwarts, however, seemed to find their relationship far more fascinating. I swear, people are acting like this is some great mystery, Hermione muttered one afternoon as they made their way to the Great Hall. Harry chuckled. Well, we did spend years acting like just friends. Maybe people are just shocked. Hermione shot him a look. You weren't shocked. Harry grinned. I was a little. She huffed but couldn't fight back her smile. As they reached the entrance to the Great Hall, the whispers started again, muffled conversations and stolen glances from nearby students. Some tried to be discreet. Others, like Lavender Brown and Parvati Patil, made no effort to hide their curiosity. Lavender practically bounced up to them, a gleam of excitement in her eyes. Hermione, you have to tell us, when did this happen? Hermione opened her mouth, but before she could respond, Parvati cut in, smirking. And how did it happen? Was it romantic? Did he confess under the stars? Harry groaned under his breath while Hermione pinched the bridge of her nose. Ron, who had just caught up to them, let out an exaggerated sigh. Oh, for Merlin's sake. Can you lot find something better to gossip about? Lavender ignored him entirely, leaning forward eagerly. Come on, Hermione. Give us something. Hermione exchanged a look with Harry before answering. It just happened. Parvati pouted. That's not interesting at all. Harry shrugged. Well, sorry to disappoint, but that's the truth. Lavender gave them a dramatic sigh before walking off with Parvati, both whispering to each other the moment they were out of earshot. Ron shook his head. Mental, the lot of them. Hermione sighed. At this rate, people are going to start making up stories. Ron smirked. They probably already have. Harry chuckled. As long as they don't turn it into some ridiculous fairy tale, I think we'll survive. But as they sat down for dinner, Hermione couldn't shake the feeling that Hogwarts wasn't done obsessing over them just yet. By the next morning, Hermione realized just how right she had been. The Hogwarts rumor mill had gone into overdrive. It started subtly, whispered conversations in the corridors, stolen glances from curious students. But by lunchtime, the stories had become outright ridiculous. I heard Harry serenaded her in the common room, Seamus said, barely able to contain his laughter as he sat down at the Gryffindor table. Apparently, he stood on a chair and declared his undying love for her. Ron snorted into his pumpkin juice. Blimey, I wish I'd seen that. Harry rolled his eyes. That never happened. Dean smirked. Well, I also heard Hermione hexed him first, thinking he was under the influence of a love potion. Hermione groaned. Honestly, where are people getting these ideas? Ginny, who had just arrived, slid into a seat beside them, grinning. Oh, that's nothing. Someone told me that Dumbledore himself gave you both his blessing. Harry nearly choked on his food. What? Ginny nodded, biting back a laugh. Apparently, he told you that your love would change the fate of the wizarding world. Ron clapped Harry on the back, smirking. Well, mate, no pressure. Hermione buried her face in her hands. This is getting out of control. Harry chuckled. It's Hogwarts. What did we expect? Hermione lifted her head, looking at him. Maybe people will get bored eventually. Ron scoffed. Not likely. This is the most exciting thing to happen since you defeated a mountain troll in first year, Hermione. Hermione huffed. I'd rather fight another troll than deal with this nonsense. Harry reached under the table and gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. It'll blow over. She exhaled, nodding. I hope so. But just as she said it, Colin Creevey rushed up, camera in hand, grinning ear to ear. Harry, Hermione, can I get a picture of you two together? For history, you know. Hermione groaned again. Clearly, this wasn't going away anytime soon. By the time the weekend arrived, Hermione had officially had enough. No matter where she went, people were whispering, watching, or like Colin Creevey, trying to capture the moment as if she and Harry were some kind of celebrity couple. It wasn't that she regretted anything. Quite the opposite, actually. The more time she spent with Harry, the more she realized how natural this felt. He wasn't just her best friend. He was the person who made her laugh when she was stressed, the one who could read her mood with a single glance, the one who, even in the middle of a ridiculous Hogwarts gossip storm, never stopped making her feel safe. But that didn't mean she wanted the whole school treating their relationship like a live-action romance novel. So, after yet another morning of dodging questions, Hermione finally snapped. "That's it. I need a break," she announced, slamming her book shut in the common room. Ron, who had been sitting across from her, blinked. "Air from what?" "From this. The constant staring, the rumors, the ridiculous stories." She exhaled sharply. "Harry, we need to go somewhere no one will bother us." Harry looked up from his parchment, a small smile playing on his lips. "Anywhere in mind?" Hermione thought for a moment before nodding. "The room of requirement." Ron let out a low whistle. "Blimey, you're really serious about this." Hermione gave him a pointed look. "Yes, Ron, I am." Harry stood, stretching. "Well, if it means we get some peace, I'm all for it." As they made their way through the castle, Hermione kept her head down, trying to avoid drawing any more attention. By the time they reached the 7th floor, she let out a sigh of relief. Harry paced 3 times in front of the blank stretch of wall, and just as expected, a door appeared. He pushed it open, revealing a cozy, firelit room with 2 comfortable armchairs, a soft rug, and walls lined with bookshelves. Hermione's shoulders instantly relaxed. "This is perfect," she murmured, stepping inside. Harry shut the door behind them. Finally, no staring. She turned to him, crossing her arms. "I still don't understand why people are acting like this is the most shocking thing to ever happen." Harry chuckled. "I think it's because they always saw us as best friends first." Hermione huffed. "That shouldn't make a difference." He smiled at her, stepping closer. "Does it really bother you that much?" She hesitated. "I just don't like being the center of attention." Harry reached out, taking her hand. "Then let's forget about everyone else. Just for now." She met his gaze, feeling the warmth of his fingers around hers. And for the first time in days, Hermione stopped thinking about the rumors, the stares, the whispers. Right now, it was just them. And that was enough. The room of requirement became their sanctuary. For the next few days, whenever the gossip and attention became too overwhelming, Harry and Hermione would slip away, disappearing into the quiet comfort of their hidden retreat. Here, there were no whispers, no curious stares. Just the 2 of them, wrapped in the warmth of flickering firelight and the soft hum of quiet conversation. One evening, as Hermione sat curled up in one of the armchairs, a book resting on her lap, Harry watched her with a fond smile. "You know," he said, breaking the silence, "I think this is the first time we've actually had time to just be together without interruptions." Hermione looked up from her book, tilting her head. "You're right." He leaned back, arms resting behind his head. "Not that I mind, but I don't think I ever imagined us sneaking off like this just to avoid people." She chuckled. "Neither did I. But if this is what it takes for some peace, I'm not complaining." Harry grinned. "So, how long do you think it'll take before people get bored and move on?" Hermione sighed. "With how invested everyone seems." "A while." He groaned. "Brilliant." She smiled, closing her book and shifting to face him fully. "But you know what? Let them talk. Let them make up ridiculous stories. It doesn't change anything between us." Harry reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "No, it doesn't." A comfortable silence settled between them, and for a moment, Hermione allowed herself to simply exist in the warmth of his presence. Then, suddenly, the door to the room of requirement swung open. Harry and Hermione both jumped, turning to see a very out-of-breath Ron standing in the doorway, his face flushed. "There you 2 are," he panted. "You might want to get out here. Something's happening." Hermione shot Harry a worried look before rising to her feet. "What do you mean, something's happening?" Ron gestured wildly. "I mean, the entire school is losing its mind because of you 2. Someone, probably Malfoy, started spreading this ridiculous rumor that you're engaged." Harry blinked. "Wait, what?" Ron nodded frantically. "Yeah, and people are actually believing it. There are first years running around saying you proposed under the Whomping Willow. Hermione groaned, rubbing her temples. I don't believe this. Harry ran a hand through his hair. This is getting completely out of control. Ron folded his arms. Yeah, well, you might want to do something about it before someone decides to throw you a wedding feast in the Great Hall. Hermione shot Harry a look. I am going to hex Malfoy. He sighed. Let's just go deal with this before it gets even worse. With that, they stepped out of their sanctuary and back into the chaos that was Hogwarts. The moment they stepped out of the room of requirement, Hermione knew Ron hadn't been exaggerating. The whispers, the stolen glances, those had been annoying before. But this was absolute madness. Students crowded the corridor, eyes wide with excitement, some grinning, others whispering behind their hands. The moment they spotted Harry and Hermione, an eruption of noise filled the air. There they are. Congratulations, Harry. When's the wedding? I heard McGonagall's going to officiate. Hermione felt her stomach twist. Oh, for Merlin's sake. Harry groaned, rubbing his face. How did this even start? Ron shot them a knowing look. Again, probably Malfoy. I heard him telling a bunch of Slytherins that you two were secretly engaged and didn't want anyone to know. Of course, the moment he said that, the whole school knew. Hermione clenched her fists. I am going to turn him into a bloody ferret. Dean Thomas jogged up to them, grinning. So, when's the big day? Do we get to come? Seamus appeared beside him, nudging Harry. You need a best man, mate? I'd be honored. Neville, looking slightly hesitant, approached as well. Is it true? I mean, if it is, congratulations. Hermione exhaled slowly, pinching the bridge of her nose. No, it is not true. Harry nodded firmly. Yeah, we're not engaged. Seamus smirked. You sure? Because the way you two disappear together. Hermione shot him a glare so sharp he instantly shut up. Ginny appeared then, arms crossed, looking amused. I thought the rumor about Dumbledore blessing your relationship was ridiculous. But this is something else. Luna Lovegood wandered over, looking thoughtful. Well, it wouldn't be too surprising. Nargles have a way of bringing soulmates together. Hermione stared at her, momentarily at a loss for words. Harry sighed. Look, everyone, this has gone way too far. We are not engaged. We're dating, that's it. No wedding, no proposals, no secret rings. Lavender Brown, who had just joined the growing crowd, pouted. Oh, but that would have been so romantic. Hermione groaned, tugging Harry's sleeve. Come on, let's get out of here before someone starts throwing rice at us. He didn't need to be told twice. Grabbing Hermione's hand, he pulled her through the crowd, ignoring the playful cheers that followed. Ron trailed behind them, laughing under his breath. This is your fault, Hermione muttered to Harry as they rounded a corner. He gave her an incredulous look. My fault? How exactly? You're the one who decided to fall in love with me in the middle of a school full of gossips. Harry chuckled, squeezing her hand. Well, I don't regret it. Hermione felt her irritation fade just a little. Neither do I. But as they turned the next corner and spotted Malfoy smirking at them from across the corridor, she knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over yet. Draco Malfoy leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his trademark smirk firmly in place. Well, if it isn't Hogwarts' golden couple, he drawled. Tell me, Potter, have you picked out the wedding colors yet? I hear Weasley's shade of red would make for a lovely theme. Harry sighed, already feeling his patience slipping. Drop it, Malfoy. Malfoy ignored him, his gaze shifting to Hermione. And Granger, I must say, I never pegged you for someone who'd settle for a rushed engagement. Or is it that you wanted to secure Potter before he found someone else? Hermione's wand was in her hand before she even realized it. Careful, Malfoy, she said, her voice low and controlled. Unless you want to spend the rest of the day as a bouncing ferret. Ron let out a bark of laughter. Oh, I'd love to see that again. Draco's smirk faltered for the briefest second before he regained his composure. Touchy, aren't we? He took a step closer, lowering his voice. It's funny. People have always said that Potter and I are rivals, but I never really saw the point in going after him. Until now. Harry frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Malfoy's smirk widened. Oh, nothing. Just that you finally got something worth taking. His eyes flicked to Hermione for just a second before he turned on his heel and strolled away, whistling as he went. Hermione let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. What in Merlin's name was that? Harry was still glaring at Malfoy's retreating figure. I don't know, but I didn't like it. Ron scoffed. Malfoy's just being Malfoy, stirring up trouble because he's got nothing better to do. Hermione, however, wasn't so sure. The way Malfoy had spoken, the deliberate way he had looked at her, it wasn't just about the rumors. Still, she shook her head. Whatever game he's playing, we're not getting involved. Harry nodded, though he still looked unsettled. Agreed. But later that evening, as Hermione sat in the library trying to focus on her studies, she couldn't shake the feeling that Malfoy wasn't done yet. And that worried her more than she wanted to admit. For the next few days, Malfoy's words lingered in Hermione's mind. It wasn't just his usual taunting. It felt calculated, as if he was planning something. But with everything else going on, she tried to push it to the back of her mind. Unfortunately, Hogwarts wasn't about to let them have a moment of peace. Harry and Hermione were walking toward the Great Hall when a group of Hufflepuff girls suddenly rushed up to them, starry-eyed. Harry, Hermione, is it true that you're moving in together after Hogwarts? One of them asked excitedly. Hermione nearly choked. Excuse me? Another girl, barely containing her excitement, clutched her hands together. Oh, everyone's saying that since you're already engaged, you're planning to get a cottage together. It's so romantic. Harry groaned. Who keeps making these things up? Probably the same people who think Dumbledore's going to officiate, Hermione muttered. Ron, who had just caught up to them, was nearly doubled over with laughter. Blimey, you two can't catch a break, can you? We would if people stopped believing ridiculous rumors, Hermione huffed. Harry ran a hand through his hair. All right, listen. There's no wedding, no cottage, no secret honeymoon plans. It's just us dating. That's it. The girls looked slightly disappointed but nodded before scurrying off, whispering amongst themselves. Ron clapped Harry on the back. You know, mate, if this keeps up, they're going to start saying you've got kids on the way. Hermione shot him a withering glare. Don't. Even. Joke. But as frustrating as it was, the rumors were becoming harder to ignore. Everywhere they went, people whispered, stared, and occasionally congratulated them on things that weren't even remotely true. And then, just when they thought it couldn't get worse, it did. The next morning at breakfast, Hermione was flipping through her copy of the Daily Prophet when a sharp gasp escaped her lips. Harry and Ron turned to her immediately. What's wrong? Harry asked. Hermione slowly lowered the paper, her face pale with anger. She didn't need to say anything. She simply turned the paper around so they could see the headlines splashed across the front page. The Boy Who Lived and His Secret Bride? Beneath it was a moving photograph of Harry and Hermione standing close together in the library, her hand resting on his arm. It was a completely innocent moment, but the angle made it look far more intimate than it actually was. Harry groaned. You have got to be kidding me. Ron grabbed the paper and started reading aloud. Sources inside Hogwarts have revealed that Harry Potter and Hermione Granger's relationship is far more serious than previously believed. Whispers of an engagement have turned into full-blown speculation that the couple may already be preparing for a life together after Hogwarts. Some claim that the two have been seen making secret plans, while others believe that a private wedding may not be far off. He burst out laughing. Merlin's beard. Who writes this rubbish? Hermione was fuming. Rita Skeeter. Harry groaned. Of course it's her. Who else? Ron smirked. At least she's consistent. Hermione wasn't amused. This is ridiculous. People were already talking, but now that this is in the Prophet, it's only going to get worse. Harry rubbed his temples. We need to put an end to this. But before they could figure out how, a shadow loomed over them. Malfoy. He smirked, holding up his own copy of the Daily Prophet. Well, looks like you two are practically married already. Congratulations, Potter. A mudblood for a wife. How charming. Harry was on his feet in an instant, fists clenched. Say that again, Malfoy. Malfoy's smirk widened. Touchy, aren't we? Must be true love. Hermione put a hand on Harry's arm, her voice tight with controlled fury. Ignore him. He's not worth it. Malfoy's smirk didn't fade as he leaned in slightly. Oh, but I wouldn't ignore me, Granger. You see, I've got a feeling this is just the beginning. With that, he turned and strode away, leaving them with an uneasy sense of foreboding. Hermione exhaled slowly. Something's not right. Harry nodded. Yeah, and I think we're about to find out what Malfoy's really up to. Harry's patience was wearing thin. The rumors had already been annoying, but now that Rita Skeeter had gotten involved, things were spiraling out of control. By lunchtime, students from every house were whispering behind their backs, and a few bold ones even approached them with outright congratulations. The worst part, some professors were beginning to take notice. Ah, young love, Professor Slughorn said cheerfully when they passed him in the corridor. Such a powerful force, even in the face of adversity. If you ever need advice on planning a union, my dear boy, I've assisted many notable witches and wizards in their engagements. Harry forced a tight smile and kept walking. Hermione, on the other hand, looked like she was about to hex someone. This is getting out of hand, she muttered. We need to find a way to shut this down before it spreads any further. Ron smirked. You could always just get married for real. That'd make the rumors true, at least. Hermione shot him a glare that could have turned him to stone. Not helping. They turned a corner, only to find a group of Slytherins waiting for them. At the center was Draco Malfoy, his usual smug expression firmly in place. Potter, Malfoy drawled Granger. Congratulations on the upcoming nuptials. I assume my invitation is already in the owl post. Harry gritted his teeth. Malfoy, I swear. Oh, don't be shy, Potter. It's all anyone's talking about. I mean, first, you steal the spotlight with your chosen one nonsense, and now you're securing your future with the brightest witch of your generation. Well played. Hermione crossed her arms. Why do I get the feeling you're enjoying this? Malfoy's smirk widened. Why wouldn't I? It's amusing, watching Hogwarts golden couple squirm. And let's be honest, Potter. If you're going to be stuck with a wife nagging you about your homework for the rest of your life, you might as well embrace it. Harry clenched his fists, but before he could respond, Hermione stepped forward, her voice ice cold. You seem awfully interested in our relationship, Malfoy. Almost too interested. Tell me, do you spend all your free time obsessing over our love life, or is this just your way of coping with the fact that nobody actually likes you? The smirk on Malfoy's face twitched ever so slightly. The other Slytherins chuckled, but Malfoy quickly recovered. Oh, I don't need to obsess over anything, Granger. The whole school is already talking about you. You should be thanking me. I'm only helping speed things along. Harry narrowed his eyes. What's that supposed to mean? Malfoy shrugged, feigning innocence. Oh, nothing. Just that sometimes the right words in the right ears can make a story spread much faster. Hermione's expression darkened. You're behind this, aren't you? Draco gave an exaggerated look of offense. Me? Oh, come now, Granger. You think I have time to manipulate the media? That would require effort. Harry took a step forward. Enough with the games, Malfoy. What do you really want? Malfoy regarded him for a moment, as if considering whether or not to answer. Then he leaned in slightly, lowering his voice just enough for only them to hear. Let's just say, I'm curious to see how long you two can keep up this perfect little act before something cracks. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Harry and Hermione standing there, tense and uneasy. Ron exhaled. That was weird. Even for Malfoy. Hermione looked troubled. He's up to something. I don't know what, but he's definitely involved. Harry nodded. Then we need to figure out what he's planning. Before it's too late. The rumors had reached a fever pitch. By the next morning, it felt like the entire school had accepted the fabricated story as fact. Even the professors seemed to be treating them differently. Professor McGonagall gave Hermione a knowing glance during Transfiguration, and Flitwick looked downright delighted whenever he saw them. This is insane, Hermione muttered as they walked out of the Great Hall. It's like we've lost control of our own lives. Harry sighed. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised if someone started planning our wedding for us. Ron grinned. You might want to check the Ravenclaws. I overheard some of them discussing color schemes. Hermione groaned. This isn't funny, Ron. I don't know, Ron said, still amused. I think Malfoy's got a point. This is actually pretty entertaining. Harry, however, wasn't laughing. His mind kept circling back to Malfoy's words. I'm curious to see how long you two can keep up this perfect little act before something cracks. Malfoy wasn't just having fun, he was waiting for something. and that made Harry uneasy. They made their way to the library, hoping for a little peace, but the moment they stepped inside, Hermione stopped short. "What now?" Ron asked. Hermione pointed to the nearest table, where several students were flipping through a stack of newspapers. One of them, a fifth-year Hufflepuff, held up a copy of the Daily Prophet. Harry's stomach dropped. There was another article. Hermione stormed over and snatched it from the students' hands before they could protest. As soon as her eyes scanned the page, her face turned white with rage. "What does it say?" Harry asked, already dreading the answer. Hermione swallowed hard, then read aloud. "Inside sources confirm. Harry Potter and Hermione Granger to wed? Secret plans uncovered." She turned the page, her voice trembling with anger. "Reliable sources within Hogwarts claim that the young couple has already begun discussing their future. Close friends suggest that wedding plans are well underway and that an official announcement is expected soon. Could this be the most anticipated union in wizarding history?" She slammed the paper down. "I am going to murder Rita Skeeter." Ron whistled. "Blimey, she's doubling down, isn't she?" Harry took the paper, scanning it for more details. His jaw tightened. "It says the information came from a student close to the couple." Hermione's eyes darkened. "Malfoy." Ron frowned. "You really think he'd go to Rita Skeeter?" Hermione clenched her fists. "If it meant causing chaos? Absolutely." Harry exhaled sharply. "Then we need to stop him. If he's feeding her information, this isn't going to end. And if he's waiting for something to crack, then we need to find out what he's planning before it happens." Hermione nodded. "Agreed. But how?" Harry's gaze hardened. "We confront him. Tonight.